then it sort of happened that like people found out that I made music, and then I started making music for different like D&D creators, and then I started getting paid to make that music, and then I sort of like all of a sudden had people watching my music on my YouTube channel because I would just like post it. But it came from the music. So all of like the earliest music on my channel was made for like D&D streamers.
Welcome to Uploaded, where I, Angela, chat with VTubers about what they've uploaded. Kobu is not just a classically trained cellist, but also a composer who is not afraid to step outside of the box when it comes to creating music for himself and others. He is currently at school, and he's here to give me a quick crash course on music orchestration. Also, make sure to check out his music, which we are currently listening to right now. Let's go say hi. So thank you for joining today. As someone who has listened to music all her life and grew up playing all types of instruments and singing and whatnot, it's interesting. I actually have no interest in creating my own music, so I'm really excited to talk to you and pick your brain on how and why you have this passion in making music. You know, anyone who looks up your YouTube channel or your Spotify account, they can see all types of styles and music and everything. So I'm just curious to know, what is your process with starting off? How do you decide what to do first?
It's funny, but I guess I don't really necessarily have like a set process. What I do is I listen to a lot of like different styles of music. So when I sit down, I'm like, I'm going to write something or I'm going to make something. It's just sort of like what I feel like making at that time. And I really try actually kind of hard to not sort of restrict myself unless like, you know, it's like a job, like unless I have to do it, you know, for someone, because I think it's just best to sort of like write whatever I feel like writing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of like my taste, because my taste is just like kind of all over the place. Like there's really no genre of music that I don't listen to, you know, at least a little bit. I ended up just making a lot of different music.
Because you go by what you are inspired with. So I'm curious to know if, let's say, like a client hired you for something that you aren't as familiar with, how would you proceed with getting better at that?
You know, I think it's the same with every genre. It's like you just have to sort of listen to it a lot, and you kind of pick apart and maybe try to figure out like how it's structured and how it's put together and try to relate it to like things that you know. But yeah, I mean, it just all starts with just listening and sort of internalizing it. And I mean, yeah, like, you know, I've studied music, so maybe that also helps me to sort of like parse through stuff and figure out how things work. But, you know, you got to start somewhere. That's really all that you can do. That's the first thing that you know, the first step.
Okay. So do like learning from other examples is something really important. I guess then, because there's so much music out there, are you ever afraid of accidentally copying someone else's or like sounding too similar to someone else?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is something that like when I studied music, like I studied like music history and stuff. And it's funny because it's just like you study music history and you go to a certain point and then you realize that sort of everyone's just kind of, there's a lot of things where everyone's kind of come up with the same way to get to the same place, like in just different, like things develop, you know, around the world, like independently. So I really, I don't worry about it at all because I just know that like whatever I've written, whatever I've done, there's someone else who's like done something like that. And a lot of times I could actually, I think with any music that I make, like I could tell you sort of almost exactly like who the artists are, or like the pieces or songs or whatever, like where you can find like the exact sort of elements. But I think it's all about like, first of all, knowing, you know, where it comes from and being like aware of that, but also you can have all these different elements and stuff. And like you can take things from different places, but it's the way that you put them together and the way that you combine them that makes your music like stand out from others.
And you mentioned you studied music, I assume for probably a very long time. You're in school.
Yeah,
right
I'm
now
still
for
studying.
it, and you are.
Yeah.
But you are a classically trained celloist. My question is because of that. I feel like I rarely hear the cello though as like a primary instrument in your original pieces. Is that on purpose? Do you separate cello performance from music composition at all, or?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I mean, it's like, I guess maybe most of my work in cello happens sort of away from anything like I do on the internet. So that might also be why, because so much, like I do cello so much of my life that when I actually go and sit down, and like kind of have this stuff that's very separate, I think, from like my life outside of Kobu. I think I always kind of gravitate towards stuff that isn't the cello. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really consciously separate it, but it sometimes kind of happens. Although, like, when I think doing stuff for like VTSO and stuff like that, then it kind of, yeah, I kind of engage with it a little bit more. But it's also because like the music that I make as Kobu it was usually not really that classical, I would say.
Obviously with cello, then you have experience with string instruments and everything like that. So then when you decide to switch, or, when you have vocalists, do you see any struggles with, is it different making music for different instruments, or is it relatively all the same?
Oh yeah, no, I mean all the time. I encounter, difficulties in this. One of the big things for me is like when I started making music as Kobu, I had really no idea how to work with voice because I literally never kind of worked in that sort of jurisdiction. I just kind of had to learn because there were like there were like commissions I had to do and like songs that I had to make with people who were singers, and I just had to kind of come up with it. And yeah, I encounter this all the time, but it's a great learning experience because even though, it was something that I just did for fun and just to sort of have an outlet, it actually ended up giving me a lot of tools that I do also use in my actual professional real life career that like pays the bills. Like learning how voice works and learning how these instruments work and stuff has actually been really helpful for me. But yeah, no, in the beginning, definitely like things like voice. Writing for piano was really difficult because I'm not a pianist, Also just sort of learning how to like mix and master my own music and work my way around a DAW. I mean, I was self-taught with all of that stuff. So yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm still, still to this day, like learning a lot about it.
I feel like a lot of people don't think about like how music is made. Most of us are passive listeners, right? Or just, whatever is on the radio or on Spotify and Apple, we just listen to it. So hearing about the process and the different techniques you have to do for whether it's genre or instruments, it's really cool to hear. You told me your hot take is that Brahms is a terrible orchestrator. We kind of already touched on what makes a good orchestrator, but I would love to hear more about your thoughts on why you think Brahms is a terrible one. And what makes a good one.
Also, I want to say like publicly, I think Brahms is a great composer. Like I know Brahms is like one of those like classical legends, and I think he makes beautiful music. But I really don't like his orchestral writing because I've been in the cello section. I've played many Brahms orchestral pieces, and they are like so awkward to play, and you can't hear anything, and it just sounds like mud. It's really thick, But this is the thing, like, so like orchestration as like a craft has really sort of changed over like the history of Western classical music, because the orchestra itself has like changed as well. Like the orchestra kind of was different in like the 1700s than it is now. And so the way that people, like the things that people figured out the orchestra could do, it took them time to like figure it out. So you can't necessarily blame Brahms, and also like people like Beethoven, and like there's a lot of music from like 1800s, 1700s that's not as, I guess maybe not as inventive as like orchestral music from like the 1900s or something, simply because they just hadn't figured this stuff out yet. But Brahms was a pianist, and so a lot of times when he writes for like orchestral instruments, it really doesn't fit the orchestral instrument. It's very awkward to play, and it's just not very crisp and clear. It sounds very like, if you ever go and watch a Brahms symphony, I mean, it's going to be great music, but it's going to definitely sound very like warm and rich, and like, it has this, the music is like, has this super, like, it's just really, really thick. And I mean, if you like that, like, that's great. That's not like the kind of music that I like. I like really like sort of sharp, clear things, but it's all subjective. When I think of like orchestral like pieces, I never really like go to Brahms.
It's one of those things I never thought about, because right now in our modern timeline with digital and easy access to everything, we can hear what every instrument sounds like. So we can pick and choose, this is what I want for this sound and this is what I want for that sound. But I'm curious to know, if Brahms is a piano player, how much access he had to other instruments to hear and think about how he wanted to arrange his music.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's other things too. Like orchestras back then were way smaller, and also like string players played on like different. They probably, I don't even know, they might have played on gut strings still back then instead of like steel strings. There were like wind instruments that were like had just been invented and stuff, and so it was definitely like the orchestra definitely sounded different. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of like almost like modern orchestration. Like if you hear like a John Williams piece and stuff like that, or I don't know, what's another good example, like Ravel, or like a Mahler symphony, or even Tchaikovsky. Actually, like the famous like Tchaikovsky orchestral pieces. A lot of the way that they treat the orchestra it's very different in those pieces, because by that point there was this guy Rimsky-Korsakov. I don't know if do you know the piece Scheherazade? It's like his most famous piece.
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, Rimsky-Korsakov is like a Russian composer, kind of around the same time as Tchaikovsky. Actually, I think he's a little older than Tchaikovsky, but he was really famous because he like researched how orchestral instruments work really deeply, and so he wrote like a book called Principles of Orchestration, which is now like required reading of all composers and also just like music students in general. A lot of times you have to read this, and it's this really, really in-depth kind of guide on basically what works and what doesn't in orchestra. But that was like at the end of the 1800s. And so before then, like people were they didn't have this knowledge. Like this guy went and like researched all of this stuff. So like a lot of these composers like Stravinsky, Tchaikovsky, Ravel, and John Williams probably too, film composers, they studied this book. And so that's why they're able to make the orchestra sound so different than like Brahms, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, a lot of those earlier composers. It's just a really nice sort of cheat code, basically. Like if you're ever writing for an instrument and you think, oh my God, how is this instrument going to sound with this instrument? I won't know. Like you can just probably look in the book and they'll tell you like violin and flute's a great combo, or French horn and cello is a great combo, or, so like it's just a nice, like sort of
like a cheat sheet. I want to do a tier list, but I've realized I have a conundrum. I'm going to share my screen. This might actually, the first test might be, how well do you know these composers as orchestrators? Because to me, they all kind of look the same.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're all like old European guys.
I think this one is clearly Mozart. Iconic photo Mozart. Of Mozart. Yep. Second guy looks more modern, but that's all I can tell you. Well, let's just...
Okay, so that's Brahms. That's Brahms.
Oh, okay. So Brahms. Let's just start with him then. Do you think SABCD, that he's all the way at the bottom?
I would not put him all the way at the bottom. I would put him at C, because there is definitely like, he definitely thought about this stuff, and like the opening of like Brahms' Fourth Symphony is like really pretty. So like he had his moments, but I think generally, yeah, not that great.
All right, let's go back then. Mozart. What do we think about our guy Mozart?
Solid A. Mozart lives in a time when the orchestra was really simple. He's famous because he followed all the rules really, really well, and he didn't have to like even think about it because he was like a prodigy. So he's not like S tier, like he didn't break a ton of new ground, but he like did everything basically perfectly. So yeah, I would put A. I would say A.
Okay. We have another photograph.
That's Wagner. That's Wagner.
I'm glad you know this.
Yeah.
I know the names, but faces are a different thing.
Yeah, I know. The faces are hard sometimes. I know.
What are your thoughts on Wagner? Wagner, German.
I would have to put him in S, because Wagner like revolutionized a lot of the orchestra. He even invented like his own instruments for his specific,
Oh, I didn't know that.
like for the operas and stuff that he was writing. Yeah, there's like a Wagner tuba. It's crazy. It's like this little tiny tuba. He actually invented it specifically. Like, yeah, he's nuts. I mean, he wrote like 9-hour operas. This guy is just crazy.
I'm sorry, 9 hour, like people performed
Yeah.
9 hours of opera.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with breaks or whatever, but so the piece that goes bum 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 dun,
Oh, yeah.
dun, 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 bum, yeah, that's from one of the operas that are it's one of 4 operas that's a cycle based on like Germanic, like Norse legend called the Ring Cycle, and I think the Ring Cycle is like it's like 12 hours, something like that. It's crazy in total. And they've done like they've done this like at opera festivals and stuff where they will like do the entire Ring Cycle over like a week or like, you know, over a couple weeks, and
my
you just like
God.
go and see. There's like 4 different operas. It's pretty nuts. Yeah.
I need to look this
long.
up because I can't imagine 9 hours. That's insane.
Yeah, I don't know. Siegfried's between 4 and 5 hours with 2 intermissions.
Oh my God. I don't even know. I'm just imagining someone being like, hey, yeah, we have a gig coming up. It's going to be at least 4 hours long. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, playing is one thing. I can't imagine singing on stage in like an opera that lasts 4 hours. I mean, I don't know how they do it.
All right, this Wagner. I need to look this man up because this is I don't know if I like him or not because that sounds almost like torture to me.
Yeah, oh, it's good music. But
Yeah,
it's long.
Another photographer. I think this is the Debussy. I think is how you would pronounce his name.
Yep, yeah, Debussy. That's Debussy. Yep.
He's also a well-known pianist. I don't think I know. I think I know. I'm more familiar with his piano works. I'm not too sure about how he does with orchestra.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's really famous for like Clair de Lune and stuff like that. Yeah, he's a great pianist. So this is crazy. Debussy, I would put in D, and this is why. I've played Debussy orchestral pieces. He has an orchestral piece. It's a group of movements called La Mer, which is basically about the sea. It's about the ocean. It's like his most famous orchestral piece, I would say, and it's kind of like an orchestral staple. Every time I've played La Mer, we've had to dedicate like 2 of the rehearsals just to balance because it's so badly orchestrated that a lot of the stuff that you need to hear, literally, you have no idea if you're going to be able to hear it unless you like have someone go out in the auditorium and like listen, and then you have to like basically change everything that you're doing based on the hall that you're in. So it's super, super difficult to like make it work. Like, and this is why I would say out of any composer I've ever played, Debussy has always been the toughest to like actually make work in the orchestral format. Like a lot of times there'll be stuff in the score like,
sorry, no, I think you're about to explain it, but like, what do you mean? How do you say it's unbalanced? So in what sense do you mean by that? And how do you fix that unbalancedness?
well, like for instance, there might be a melody in like a wind instrument somewhere, and the way that it's written, it's inaudible unless you bring the dynamics that he marked in the strings, for instance, like way down, you know, and you just like say, okay, he said mezzo forte, we got to do this pianissimo.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really not practically written.
I see. So there's a lot up for interpretation on when you get the score for his stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, he has great ideas, and when you can make it work, it's like super dope. But yeah, I've never ever had this experience with any other composer where there's so much that you always have to change in what's written just to make it work in the hall.
I wonder if this goes back to, again, different times, maybe different stages, different instruments. Do you think there was a reason for why he did it the way he did?
I don't really know, you know. I mean, the thing is, Debussy, like, he lived sort of almost at the same time as some of the greatest orchestrators. like in history, like Ravel and Stravinsky, for instance, Mahler. Those are three of like the people who are like, I would say, some of the most up there in terms of like what people think about when they think about orchestration. But I think Debussy, like, his music's super weird, you know? His music's super strange, and it's really experimental a lot of times. And so I think he just kind of really, he just really went with whatever he wanted. And a lot of times it just wasn't necessarily the practical choice. It's funny because if you talk to pianists about Debussy, like if you ever talk to, for instance, like Enva about Debussy, I'm sure that she would tell you that it is like some of the most like ingeniously written piano music. Like the way that he knows how the piano works is just like beyond so many composers. And it's so detailed and so difficult because he knows exactly how the piano is going to respond. So on the flip side, when he's writing for piano, it's like he almost more than anyone knows a lot about how the instrument works. But then with orchestra, it's just he didn't really consider, I think, a lot of practical choices.
Favorite child, basically.
Yeah.
We've got one of our most famous composers out there. What do you think about Beethoven?
It's hard because Beethoven's so good, right? Like it's super, like, I mean, the music is amazing. But
he also has a handicap.
Yeah, like he was deaf. Yeah. By the end, I honestly, I'm going to have to. Beethoven, I think like the symphonies, for instance, I think they're so good because the music is just so good. But there's nothing really in any of the symphonies that is like stands out to me in terms of orchestration. In fact, sometimes it's just a little kind of, I don't know. I feel like when you hear Beethoven, it's one color, you know, and it's like incredible music, but it is kind of one color. And so I would put him in C because of that. Even though, I mean, literally Ninth Symphony, like one of the greatest pieces of Western classical music ever written. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a vocalist, but I've heard from vocalists that the Ninth Symphony is actually extremely awkward to sing. So yeah, Beethoven again. I don't know if he was interested really in kind of doing crazy stuff with orchestration. I think he was just, he's just Beethoven.
All right, then we have another unfamiliar face for me. That is
this guy in the wig. That's Haydn.
Haydn was also Mozart's era, right?
Yep. Yeah. Same time. They lived around the same time. Yeah. They both got that 17th
oh yeah, they do.
18th century wig.
That should have been an obvious clue. All right. Our last big classicalist.
So I would put Haydn like solid B. Yeah. Because he wrote like over 100 symphonies or something like that. And a lot of them, they were just like churned out because he was like basically paid to make them by like royalty. So a lot of times they're not necessarily like he didn't spend too much time on them. They're like really great, but they're not like groundbreaking. I don't know if he was as like, I mean, Mozart is like a freaking like, he's a prodigy, you know? So, I mean, I don't know if we can really say Haydn was necessarily, But back then in the classical era, the rules were so strict about like what you did with the orchestra that it's really hard to differentiate between them. I would just put Haydn in B because it's a little less, to me, I don't know, it's a little more samey than Mozart.
I see.
But good stuff. Great stuff. Love Haydn.
Okay. Well, we've successfully filled out S to D. So I'm going to stop here. I feel like we've got a good rounded of orchestrators here that I would love to now go and listen to and see if I have the same opinions as you.
Oh, yeah. And see, actually, also, I would say that next guy, Mahler, down there, if you ever want to hear what music basically is like the prototype for John Williams, that's Mahler. Mahler is incredible. He almost only wrote symphonies, and his symphonies, the orchestration is crazy. I would definitely put him S tier.
Okay.
But yeah.
There we go. All right.
Have to shout out Mahler because I just saw him down there.
Awesome. Okay.
It's awesome stuff. Yeah.
We are currently working on a big project from one of the Final Fantasy franchises with VTSO. You arranged a medley for this, which also included vocals. Is it harder to work on something that already has a score? Final Fantasy has such a memorable soundtrack, so much to the point where they've been performing live for a while now. Or is it harder to make something from scratch?
I would definitely say it's harder to make something from scratch, for me anyway, because when I did the Final Fantasy medley, basically all I did was I just listened to it, and the hardest thing was just figuring out how faithful do I want to be to the original stuff, and then what things do I want to add or change about it. But when you start from scratch, I mean, it's like you sit in front of a DAW, or you sit in front of your notation software and you have nothing, and you just have to come up with something. And so that is definitely a whole different journey that sometimes it takes forever, you'll write one or two measures, and then you won't come back to it for months, and then you'll finally have a breakthrough later on or something like that. Whereas I think with the Final Fantasy stuff, for instance, I mean, it's just I had the material all there. It was just a matter of listening to it, transcribing it, and then sort of moving it around. Those are skills that also are very different from when you're just composing from scratch, because you have to put Spotify on and listen to this one section over and over again. If there's no score, you have to figure out what instruments are playing here. And there's definitely other, things that are difficult about it. I just find it definitely a little bit harder to just start from scratch than to just arrange something that's already there.
You mentioned about how adding your own style to it, or having to remove or add something. Do you have an example in mind of when you had to either add or take something away from the score?
Yeah, actually the whole first movement. So when I did To Xanarkand, I just listened to the solo piano version, and that's actually one of the only ones in that medley that I had sheet music for, but it was just the solo piano. So everything in that orchestration is just me coming up with stuff, and it's all from the piano part. Yeah, that's just I think a great example, because it was nice because I really got to get super creative. And I mean, when Azure gave me the green light to do the medley, I asked him, I was like, how complex, how difficult can I make this? He was like, you can just go, as far as you want. And so that was really cool to be able to basically just sit in front of a piano score and turn it into, a complete orchestration. And just all my ideas were just sort of, I could do whatever I wanted with it, which was really nice.
You mentioned starting from scratch is harder. Was there a similar struggle when you worked on your own original music that was inspired by Final Fantasy? How did you balance inspiration versus not just copying?
So when you listen to it, you have to kind of figure out, okay, what is the language of this music? What are the different chords that they always use? There's certain chord progressions that music for video games and music for anime uses a lot, or this or that. So you kind of lock into the little musical elements that distinguish different styles, and so can incorporate those into what you write. So the chord progression in that piece was a chord progression that I feel could definitely fit in a Final Fantasy piece, because the chords move in a certain way that I've heard also in stuff for Final Fantasy and for other video games too. I heard it in the Nier soundtrack. And so it's kind of learning, it's a spoken language. You learn different words, and then if you're trying to let's say you want to make a fake Italian word, you'd probably just look up a bunch of different Italian words and try to make a word that's kind of spelled how an Italian word would be spelled, and pronounced how an Italian word would be pronounced. And so that's kind of I guess the way that you get this sort of music that sounds like something, but not actually is just a copy of it.
Okay. And then speaking of video games, I know you've made a lot of Baldur's Gate content, specifically remixes. So we've talked about, creating medleys, we talked about creating original, but what inspired you to create remixes?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's my personal favorite video game. I remember when it came out and like I played it, so like just totally addicted. Like I played through it completely straight through, and it was, yeah, I mean, it's like definitely the top video game for me anyway. So I have, already like a big passion for it. I love the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack's awesome. Also, like the thing is that a lot of the music I enjoy is, a completely different genre. And my philosophy when it like comes to like just making stuff and like putting stuff on my channel was always like, if I just feel like it sounds kind of cool or sounds good, like I'll just do it. Even if it's a crazy idea, like even if it's just like ridiculous, because that just is to me like all music. I mean, I play like, all different types of music as a musician in my professional life. And it's all good. Like none of it to me kind of is any sort of more valid than the other. And so when I do like remixes of stuff, like it's just basically I love putting things together that you wouldn't even think you would want them to be together. But it just, yeah, that's why, because I could, do a cover or something of it or like do this or that. But I just think it's just a lot more fun to just see like, it's you're sort of a mad scientist kind of vibe with it. You just put stuff together and like people are like, what? Like, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also, I saw some silly stuff on your YouTube channel. Like maybe, am I making these up or is there like a milkshakes one?
There is, yeah. Because I just heard I heard her like do that like TikTok, and I was like, okay, well, let me put it like on the actual thing. Like,
I feel like that's what the internet is for. It's just like finding ways to get inspired, but then also ways to make people laugh.
yeah, definitely, yeah. And I mean, people don't really care about, if you go on YouTube, like you'll see all these like crazy mashups of like different songs and stuff. Like people really don't care anymore about, oh, it has to be like, this kind of thing. Like they just, if it sounds great, they're like down for it, which is like, I think the best thing about it.
But you don't just create music, because you also work on stories. You used to, at least publicly, you used to DM D&D before your hiatus. Does that help with music at all? But I'm just curious, because it's both, you're very creative in all your hobbies, it sounds like. Do they ever connect at all? Obviously with Baldur's Gate, it is a D&D game, inspired game. But have you ever connected D&D with your music?
Yeah, well, actually, I think the whole D&D thing, it's a funny because it came from me making music on the internet. Like I'd always been into D&D, and I think as early as like, around like the 3.5 era was when I first got introduced to it. So like I knew about D&D for a really long time. But then what happened was I, like so many other people during, like 2020, like height of COVID, was just watching a lot of Twitch. And I started watching a lot of D&D on Twitch and started getting back into it. And I had never even paid attention to like D&D in maybe about like 10 years, basically since I was like in middle school. So I got into it, and then I actually got really involved sort of like in the communities and stuff, basically because I was just at home all day and like, like just watching and stuff. And then it sort of happened that like people found out that I made music, and then I started making music for different like D&D creators, and then I started getting paid to make that music. And then I sort of like all of a sudden had people watching my music on my YouTube channel because I would just like post it. I eventually was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with basically this tiny little audience that I have. Like, what am I going to do with it? And so I was like, well, I like D&D, so I'm just going to make content, and I'm just going to make music as well. And that's sort of going to be sort of the two things that I do a lot. But it came from the music. So all of like the earliest music on my channel was made for like D&D streamers.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh. So, okay. I honestly asked you this question just to be like, what are the odds? And then you're like, no, actually, that's the whole reason. That's amazing. Because for me, I come from a more mainstream background of D&D where, I've seen Dropout, I've seen Critical Role, which is more focused on the performers or the comedians. So to hear that there are, streamers who are focused on music and ambiance, that's pretty cool to hear. You are kind of on a hiatus publicly because you're in school, you're focusing on cello performance. Is there anything you're looking forward to after you wrap up school?
Life as a cellist is really quite busy, which is it's a privilege. Like it's something that doesn't really. It's very difficult to kind of, I think, sometimes for people to get to that point. So I really know that it's like it's something that I have to keep on top of, and I should be really grateful for. But unfortunately, it also means it's like I don't really have much time to be online anymore. I don't want to like just disappear, especially because I have so many different connections to like sort of these different communities and different places. And I still want to kind of keep tapped in. But I do think that like once I get out of education, there is a flexibility that I might have. And like I would really love to sort of go back to being a little bit active. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point where I can be, but yeah, I mean, it's a very, like, all I can say is like, it's a really exciting time for me as a cellist. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to still being in touch and having sort of Kobu there and having the internet there and stuff. Because I think it's really, really important that no matter, how busy you get or like how, like, if your career is like this or that, I think it's really important to always have something that's just totally separate and have an outlet and have something where you're not like, in this sort of like classical music, cello, like rat race thing, and you can just kind of do things that you like.
I like that message. And it's also really happy to hear that, as musicians out there are people still working in this timeline and performing and being able to pursue their passions. I feel like I hear those stories less and less. So I am happy to hear your story. Thanks for listening to Uploaded, and thank you to Kobu for joining us today on this episode. If you liked our conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me if you would listen to a 15-hour-long opera. Bye!